If somebody eventually was able to do the character slot thing in Marvel, I'd like to put a bounty on that, so we can hopefully make this thing a possibility. And I know that this stuff takes a lot of time, and it's very tough. I would like to put $5,000 as a bounty to the team or person that is able to hopefully get that at least started. I'd like to put a $5,000 bounty so we can hopefully expand Ultimate Marvel 3 to actually have character slots. I don't know who to get a hold of. I know it's been conversed with people. I know there's been impossible things that have taken place in Ultimate Marvel 3, like the character importer, right? And there are true wizards that made that stuff happen. I would like to just be an executive producer. I just want to see it happen. And to be honest, if it does happen, I feel like it's possibly even worth more. But this is just something to hopefully to hopefully get this inspired in a way that gets people like, huh, I wonder if this is possible. I wonder if there's actually a way, like, there's a bit of time investment to make this a real thing. Honestly, one of the reasons I put the $5,000 bounty out on Marvel vs. Ultimate Marvel 3 for more character slots, to see if any devs out there or any modders can figure out how to add character slots to the game. One of the reasons I want to do that is because I feel like one of the only ways we're going to get support for Marvel vs. Capcom moving forward is through fan mods. I honestly think that. I think fan mods is essentially the future of MVC. I would like to support, if not enable, things like that can hopefully happen in the near future. So to me, it feels like crowdfunding, which is practically what I'm doing, crowdfunding some development of tools that could expand MVC Ultimate Marvel 3 as essentially being a platform to create more characters would be great. I feel like moving forward, that would be the ideal situation of making more Marvel vs. Capcom happen, leaving it into the hands of the fans as a mod project that can't make any money, unfortunately, because of the huge amount of issues. Do you think fans can mod in new characters and features into MVCI? No, because people don't like MVCI as much. That's simply it. Ultimate Marvel 3 get a rollback mod? People are essentially like, yeah, you have to understand that stuff that people are posting about the game states of Ultimate Marvel 3 is like the very early beginning of essentially a rollback mod for Marvel, right? But if there's like the work that needs to be done to put rollback netcode into Ultimate Marvel 3, what percentage is that at? Like less than 5%. If Melee can do it, you believe it? Right, but isn't Melee's built into an emulator? A backend that is already fan-made? Slippy, like, built into Dolphin or something like that? It's not messing with the code of the game. It's essentially modifying from an external tool the code of the game to get shit done. From my basic understanding, that's how it works. Marvel 3 is not emulated. Yeah, it won't work on any Dolphin game. Yeah, from what I understand, the Slippy is essentially just for Melee. But here's the difference, right? The difference is Melee is like one of the most beloved games of all time type of stuff. Sold like 15 to 25 million copies or some crazy shit. Smash Brothers Melee has also been around a lot longer. People can figure out how that game works to like the bone, right? Gotta reverse engineer PC Marvel by diving into coding a hook to attach itself to Ultimate Marvel 3, which is a bitch and a half to even get started. Yeah, you essentially have to get like my basic understanding. You have to like modify the executable or something like that, right? Weird workaround that you have to do where you can't change the game's base code, but you have to like do something outside of that. Yeah, you have to like inject it into the EXE. But then like once you add rollback netcode to Marvel 3, what does that do? It doesn't fix the problem. You essentially have one other person that has rollback netcode Marvel 3, and then you match with them or make a room, and then you'd be able to play each other, theoretically. In the same way that you mod the files of you mod the files of Guilty Gear Strive with like a Dragon Ball character. If the other person has the Dragon Ball character, you just play online. Great, having fun. Problem is the tools that have to be built around that. Like matchmaking, like a lobby system, a ranking, like all that kind of stuff. That's a whole other can of worms. So you almost have to create like a client in like a separate executable client that searches if people are available and lets you match with them. It's kind of like you have to build like a small version of Fightcade. Hold back to blocks doc on Slippy is fascinating. I should probably check that out.
Super Smash Bros. Melee. It's a game that's been around for close to 20 years now, and despite its age, it has a large and loyal fan base. Some of these players even go above and beyond just playing the game, taking matters into their own hands to either create new ways to play or code new quality of life features in or around the game itself. One of these players is Fizzy, the creator of Project Slippy, a large-scale project that adds features such as replays, complex game stats, real-time mirroring, and rollback netcode into Super Smash Bros. Melee.
Jesus.
I spoke with Fizzy earlier this year to find out about his origins of Smash.
One person? So this guy just knew how Smash Brothers Melee worked, like it was walking, right? Was so knee-deep in the code of Smash Brothers Melee that he just completely understood how everything worked.
As well as how Project Slippy came together.
I played when I was a kid. I played 64. And then when Melee came out, I played casually. And then Brawl came out. So I started playing Brawl competitively. And it was pretty fun for a bit. I was pretty decent in the Montreal scene. And then eventually some of the Montreal scene got me into Melee. And like Melee more seriously. And I think like after that, I sort of drifted away from Brawl a little bit slowly. Got sick of being camped while I was playing D2D. And I started playing Melee more, and you know, I just fell in love with Melee. It's just so good. I mean, I think there's so much depth, so much to prove yourself in. The movement is amazing. It doesn't ever feel like you're limited by the game, I think. That's the big thing for me. And you know, when Brawl came out, people thought, oh, we're just gonna switch to Brawl now. You know, like at that time, it was the first game after Melee, so people were like, oh yeah, we're just gonna switch to Brawl. And I think over time, people realized just like, Brawl just didn't hold a candle to Melee. Like it wasn't the same experience. People didn't draw as much enjoyment out of it. And I think people just slowly drifted to Melee. And I think after that point, it just kind of became a thing after that point. People were just like, oh yeah, when the new game comes out, we're just gonna play Melee. Yeah, Dan Salvato was probably one of the biggest trailblazers to Melee modding. Since then, I mean, he's quite famous. He made a DDLC, Doki Doki Literature Club. I watched his videos, his early videos about how to, you know, mod the game and like look at the hex and try to determine like where certain memory locations are being accessed and so on and so forth. 20XX was made by Achilles, also a really early modder. It was a much broader scale mod than I think had ever been done before. And it was kind of targeted at like trying to help people improve. I think it's sort of the predecessor to what is now training mode, which is made by Uncle Punch. And it's just basically like, people want to get good at Melee. We don't really have the tools for it that well. And I think 20XX added a lot of that, as well as a lot of other like, you know, nice quality of life
like
things.
Training mode stuff.
Those are kind of like the early modders. And I think obviously they were a huge inspiration to me. A lot of like what I did is thanks to them. In fact, early on, Achilles helped me directly to make the first sort of EXI push code. Honestly, even without homebrew, I think the game would still be going. Though it's definitely, I think, kept people especially excited about the scene. Because it's like, you know, a lot of people say, oh, I love the Melee scene. And I think it's for this reason. Like, we just do what we can to support our game, you know? And I think, like, the homebrew scene has allowed us to do things that ideally we would have liked our developer to do, but we don't have a developer. So
a lot of the work on that, the foundation to make this happen was because of the homebrew channel, is what I'm getting, right? That the tools that were created because of the vast swath of modding that happened on the Nintendo Wii kind of opened up Melee to be sort of given these tools that people can really get into these games if they wanted to.
Project Slippy was initially created to collect complex stats throughout a game of Melee to help better tell the narrative of a match. Want to know how much damage you've done, or what each player's openings and conversions look like? Well, Slippy can do that. But it has also grown to do so much more. What can Slippy do, and what drove Fizzy to not only create it, but also to expand past the initial vision of the project?
The initial start is just like, damn, wouldn't this be so cool? I just wanted to be like, oh, can I create complex statistics for Melee? And at first, you know, I didn't feel like it was possible. And I think that's kind of the same with all the aspects of the project. It's like, at first I'm like, this doesn't seem possible. And then I think about it, and then I slowly start to realize, like, maybe I can do this. Obviously, I have a sense to the impact from the beginning, but a lot of the things I get into are more probably for the challenge of it. I want to challenge myself, and I want to prove to myself this is possible and I can do it. And obviously, like I said, the impact is important. I wouldn't do that if like there was no impact to what I was doing. But I think the challenge is really what drives me to try.
As soon as he died, the hardware detected that somebody died. It then wrote down how many seconds since the game started from when that person dies, as well as the amount of stocks left, the percentage both characters are at, and the last move both characters connected with. As you can see, player 1's last move was knee.
The data is pushed to slot B on the Wii or GameCube. That's called the EXI bus. And so we push data out to there, and if you push data out to there, you can really listen to it in a bunch of different ways. Like, for example, the first version of Slippy was hardware. So it was literally a card that you plugged into the console, and then we had a separate board that would like listen to the data that was coming in, and we'd use that data to generate stats. But also, you know, this is something I kind of realized later, but you can do like emulated memory cards in like Nintendo, and also Dolphin supports, you know, emulated memory cards. So instead of an emulated memory card, you can have an emulated Slippy device. Originally, it was always designed to be hardware, but I realized later it doesn't have to be. It can be emulated, and then, you know, people don't have to buy anything to use it.
5, 1, 9, let's go! And I already have the launcher open. It's pointed at the correct directory. So here's our new game. We got Game & Watch, Luigi, Peach, and Roy. And let's just launch it.
So like game state functionality was completely working, right? Being able to like in data form preserve a game state, right? Playback and replays, which is essentially the beginning of rollback netcode, right? The very beginning of how rollback netcode needs to function, from my general understanding, is that this is where Ultimate Marvel 3 rollback is right now. People are figuring out game state stuff, right, in a game that doesn't have it. That's interesting, right? It's interesting that this was the beginning of it, right?
I mean, the game never had replays before Slippy, right? And so they didn't need to be perfectly deterministic. I think it was like the game was mostly deterministic, but there was just like sort of these weird edge cases and situations where things just wouldn't exactly happen the same. It sort of got compounded with the fact that we had created some of our own mods. I think one of the hardest things was UCF to make deterministic, because UCF did not use inputs the way the game used inputs. UCF is Universal Controller Fix. Different controllers are better at doing certain tech in Melee, specifically dashbacks and shield drops are the most common one. I think UCF is doing a few more things now or whatever, but you know, people always talked about the controller lottery, where you had to like get a really good controller, and you know, players would pay hundreds of dollars to get a controller that had good dashbacks and good shield drops. And UCF is a mod that makes it so that, you know, dashbacks and shield drops are more consistent on more controllers. And making it work properly was a pain. I'm still not 100% sure it always works properly, but you know, a lot of the RNG stuff we had to discover. Sometimes we would notice like RNG would desync, and it didn't really make sense why. And honestly, we still don't know why sometimes RNG desyncs, and we kind of just worked around it by backing up and restoring the RNG at the start of the frame pipeline, like before anything happens, so that when anything of import happens, like, you know, pulling turnips or whatever, it's all correct.
There was a bug.
Yeah, literal RNG mechanics, like, yeah, when characters pull an item out of the ground, and that can be like one of several items, you know, like that makes sense, right? Now, it's not properly preserving that situation, you know? Shenko item toss. Yeah, great suggestion, right? That's essentially going to be like a huge trouble area when characters pull a random thing, and then you simulate the randomness again, but that random doesn't hit the right random, you know? It's like, uh-oh. So you have to find, like, the game has to be in sync with these weird moments where it can easily desync.
Where Game & Watch and Luigi caused desyncs. I was very sad to find that out, but the good news is I fixed it. All right. And yes, we have a 9.
Mirroring, in essence, is just taking a...
This is essentially what happens constantly. This happens constantly in games with rollback netcode, chat, and is essentially a case-by-case basis that you just have to figure out in QA. And I can only explain that because it happened in Killer Instinct, where I was talking to the KI devs and talking about them like, we were working on a big update for rollback netcode when I was in Chicago, and they were talking about desyncs, and they were just working on desyncs for the next few weeks. What is that? And he's like, yeah, just moments where like the game state doesn't sync up between players and weird things cause desyncs. But that's essentially rollback netcode, right? Making sure what's happening on both players' screens is the exact same correct thing at the right time. Yeah, the KI devs were just working on that the whole time. Like the netcode guys were just always working on that. Introduce a new character, desyncs all over the place, you know? Suddenly something new is added to the game, desyncs all over the place.
replay file and transferring it to a computer in real time, and then playing it in Dolphin. And Dolphin, like you mentioned, has a lot that it can do. It can upscale the quality, and also, like, you know, people are able to use it and then get a custom HUD, because the replay file not only includes inputs,
That's really
it also
cool.
includes a whole bunch of stats and stuff, like percentages or whatever. And I think, like, it was really important for Melee in particular, because Melee, you can only get a 480p output out of the Wii. That was your max. That was your, like, you couldn't do any better than that. And 480p nowadays is, like, not great. I mean, it just doesn't look very good when you're showing it on a 1080p stream, right? Now you can send the replay file, play it in Dolphin, and you can get a 4K stream if you want. Like, I think there's so much you can do with this stuff. And I'm always sad because I feel like a lot of times I have to be the one to drive it. You have to be the one to show what you could do before anyone else does it. This was the case with, like, automatic combo videos or whatever, right? It's like, I had to do that first before people were like, oh, this is actually pretty good. And, you know, I mean, it makes sense. I made it, so I thought about, like, a lot of this stuff. But even now, there's, like, so much you can do with stats, and, like, the way stats can, like, drive a narrative for a tournament. No one has even touched on
Wow, that's crazy that all that information is now tracked. That is so cool. A lot of old games don't do this, right? A lot of games like pre-2010 do not have this kind of information. That's just crazy that it's gotten this far. It took a while, but it had the same problem Marvel is actually happening right now. That is so sick. Like, those tools are just bonkers. By the way, check out hold back to block. Oh, I see. Yeah. So here in the left. Yeah, game state manipulation. So being able to save and load game states. We're getting there. The dedicated hard work of Catboy Fucker. Take what you can get, chat, okay? Sorry, what did I just hear? I don't care about his username. You know what? Whatever. As long as the rollback's good.